When I was about 9 years old, I lived with my mom and little sister in a small one-story house in a quiet town. On the surface, nothing about the place seemed unusual. The street was calm, the neighbors were friendly enough, and during the summer kids would ride their bikes up and down without a care in the world. But inside that house, especially when night fell, things were different. There were moments that made my skin crawl, even back then. My mom used to say, "It's just an old house. Old houses make noises." But the things I remember from those nights, they didn't sound like house noises. They sounded like something else. Something I still can't explain. The first time it happened, it was late on a school night. I couldn't fall asleep, so I lay there with the blanket pulled up to my chin, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I had stuck to my ceiling. My room was small, just a bed, a dresser, and a toy chest by the window. Outside, the wind pushed the tree branches around, and their shadows danced on my walls. I told myself that was all I was seeing, shadows moving in the breeze. But then I noticed one shadow in particular. It wasn't moving like the others. It was low to the ground, near my toy chest. At first, I thought maybe it was just a pile of clothes, or one of my big stuffed animals. I almost laughed at myself for being scared of something so simple. But then I blinked and the shadow was gone. Gone, like it had never been there at all. That's when I felt it. A coldness deep inside, not the kind that comes from the air, but the kind that starts in your chest and spreads outward. I pulled the blanket over my head and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I didn't even think about it again until I saw my toy chest. It was standing wide open, like someone had been digging through it. I never left it open because my mom hated when toys spilled out onto the floor. I quickly shut it and went on with my day. I didn't tell her, because even at 9 years old, I had the sense she wouldn't believe me. Weeks later, my sister, she was only 5 at the time, casually told my mom she didn't like the man in the closet. I froze when I heard her say that. She said it so matter-of-fact, like she was talking about a doll or a cartoon. My mom brushed it off immediately, saying little kids imagine things, and she tucked my sister in that night like normal. But I saw the look on my sister's face. She wasn't pretending. She told us he stood in her closet at night and whispered, but she couldn't make out the words. That same night, I woke up to a noise. It was faint at first, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding, and realized it was coming from inside my room. The sound moved slowly, scraping closer, like fingernails being pulled across wood. I was frozen. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The sound stopped right beside my bed. I knew that if I leaned over the edge, I'd see something staring up at me. So I stayed perfectly still, clutching the blanket so tight my knuckles hurt. Eventually, I passed out from pure exhaustion. When I woke the next morning, I almost convinced myself it had been a dream. But then I saw them. Long, deep scratches carved into the floorboards right next to my bed. They weren't there before. I ran to show my mom, desperate for her to finally see what I was seeing. Instead, she got angry. She told me I must have been dragging furniture around, or scratching the floor with something sharp while I played. I swore I hadn't, but she didn't believe me. After that, things escalated. At night I'd hear whispers, faint but constant, like a radio tune just slightly off station. Always from the closet. My sister would sometimes cry in her room, pointing at the corner and repeating, "He's there. He's there." I never saw him, but I believed her. You know that feeling when someone's watching you, and every hair on your arm stands on end? That's how it felt. The worst night happened in the middle of winter. I woke up to see my bedroom door wide open. I always closed it before bed, so that was already wrong. Down the hall, my mom always left a light on for us, but as I watched, the light suddenly went out. I held my breath. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Coming down the hallway. They stopped outside my door. The hinges creaked, and the door opened just enough for me to see a tall, dark shape leaning in, its head poking into the room. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just shut my eyes as tight as I could and pretended to be asleep. When I opened them again, the door was shut. The shape was gone. The next morning, I asked my mom if she'd come into my room during the night. She looked confused and said no. She'd been asleep all night. Later, my sister told me she'd seen the man again, standing by her bed. That was the first time I saw fear on my mom's face. That night she walked through the house, lighting candles and saying prayers in each room. Things got quieter after that, for a little while. But not for long. One afternoon I came home from school before my mom. I was sitting on the couch, doing homework, when I heard a loud slam from down the hall. It was the toy chest. I froze. When I finally got the courage to check, I saw my bedroom door wide open. My toy chest was shut, but every toy I owned was scattered across the floor like someone had dumped them out. I backed away slowly, then bolted outside and sat on the porch until my mom came home. When I told her what happened, she rolled her eyes and said the cat must have knocked things over. We didn't even have a cat. Years later, after we'd moved out, I finally asked my mom if she had ever experienced anything in that house. At first, she didn't answer. Then she admitted that sometimes she'd wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow standing in her doorway. She said she never told us because she didn't want to scare us. She believed there was something wrong with that house. She thought maybe it was a man who used to live there. She never gave me more details, and I never pressed her. But I know what I saw. I know what my sister saw. And even now, as an adult, when I think back to those nights, I feel sick in my stomach. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't just an old house. It was something real. And sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I still hear it, the sound of long nails dragging slowly across the floor beside my bed. When I was about 11 years old, my family lived in a house that sat at the very edge of a neighborhood. Beyond our backyard was a line of woods that seemed to stretch forever. During the day, those woods didn't scare me at all. I used to play near the tree line with my friends, building forts and pretending we were explorers. But at night, those woods felt different. They were dark in a way that swallowed up everything, like no light could survive past the first row of trees. My room faced the backyard, and my bed was right up against the window. At night, I used to close the curtains, but during the summer, the heat would get bad, so sometimes I left them open to let the breeze come in. That's when the sightings started. The first time, I remember lying awake on a hot July night, staring out at the woods. The moonlight gave everything a pale glow, and the trees looked almost silver. That's when I saw her. A figure, standing just at the edge of the woods. She was wearing a long white dress that hung down to her ankles, and even from a distance, I could tell her skin was pale. Her hair was dark, long, and stringy, almost blending in with the shadows behind her. At first, I thought maybe it was just a trick of the moonlight, or maybe one of the neighbors messing around. But she didn't move. She didn't sway like a person standing still should. She just stood there, perfectly rigid, facing my window. I pulled the covers over my head, heart racing. Eventually, I convinced myself I must have imagined it. But the next night, she was there again. Same spot. Same white dress. Same unblinking posture. I told my parents about it the following morning. My dad laughed, saying I was letting my imagination run wild from watching too many scary movies. My mom gave me the tired look parents give when they think you're just trying to get attention. But I wasn't making it up. I knew what I saw. As the nights went on, she didn't just stand there anymore. She started to get closer. One night, I woke up to that uneasy feeling, like something was watching me. I turned my head toward the window, and my stomach dropped. She wasn't at the tree line anymore. She was standing in the middle of the backyard. Closer. I froze, staring at her. She didn't move, didn't even blink. Just stood there, her pale face tilted slightly to the side, as though she was studying me. My entire body was tense, like if I moved even a muscle, she'd notice. After what felt like forever, I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed she'd be gone when I opened them. The next morning, I checked the yard. There were no footprints in the grass, no signs that anyone had been there. But I knew what I'd seen. Weeks passed, and I started dreading bedtime. Some nights she wasn't there, and I'd let myself relax, only for her to return the next night, closer each time. My grades slipped because I wasn't sleeping. I begged my parents to let me sleep in the living room or trade rooms with my sister, but they refused. They thought I was just going through a phase. Then came the night that I'll never forget. It was around 2 in the morning when I woke up. The room was hot, the air heavy and still. I glanced toward the window, and my heart nearly stopped. She was right outside. Her face was pressed against the glass, her dark eyes staring directly into mine. The white dress was dirt-stained now, and her hair hung in tangled clumps, sticking to her face. Her lips were parted, like she wanted to say something, but no sound came out. I screamed. My parents came running, flicking on the light, but by the time they got there, she was gone. The curtains fluttered as if a breeze had just passed through, but the night air was still. I was shaking, pointing at the window, begging them to believe me. My dad stormed outside, walking around the yard with a flashlight. He came back minutes later, furious. No footprints, no sign of anyone. He told me if I pulled another stunt like this, I'd lose TV and video game privileges for the rest of the summer. That crushed me. They didn't believe me at all. But the worst part came later. About a week after the window incident, my mom was cleaning up in the kitchen when she suddenly went pale. I asked her what was wrong, and she said she thought she saw someone in the backyard. A woman in white. She brushed it off right away, forcing a smile and saying maybe she'd been mistaken, but I saw the way her hands shook as she put down the dish towel. That night, she made sure all the curtains in the house were closed. The final time I ever saw the white lady was a stormy night in late August. Rain hammered against the window, and the trees bent under the wind. I thought maybe I'd be safe, that the storm would keep her away. But then, in a flash of lightning, I saw her. Standing at the tree line again. Only this time, she wasn't just staring at me. Her arm was raised, her long finger pointing directly at my window. I screamed again, and my parents came rushing in. But when the thunder rolled and the lightning flashed again, the yard was empty. After that, we moved. Not because of her, my dad got a new job across town, and we ended up in a different house. But I never forgot her. Even now, years later, I can still picture her face against the glass, her eyes locked on mine. And sometimes, late at night, when I glance out my window, I can't help but wonder if I'll see her again. Waiting. Watching. When I was about 10 years old, I lived in a 2-story house on a quiet street. It wasn't anything special, just a normal suburban neighborhood where kids played in the yards during the day and the nights were calm enough that you could hear crickets from your bedroom window. For the most part, I felt safe there. But there's one memory from that house that I can't shake, no matter how much time has passed. It started one summer night. I'd stayed up later than I was supposed to, lying in bed with a flashlight, reading a comic book under the covers. My room overlooked the front yard, and from where my bed sat, I could see the top half of the driveway through the window. At some point, I heard something unusual, a slow crunching sound, like footsteps on gravel. I turned off my flashlight, slid the comic under my pillow, and froze. That's when I saw him. A man was standing at the end of our driveway, right where the streetlight barely touched. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the house. I remember sitting up slowly, pressing my forehead against the glass to see better. He looked tall, maybe 6 feet or more, and he was wearing dark clothes. His face, I couldn't make it out. It was shadowed, like the light just wouldn't touch it, no matter how I squinted. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe it was one of the neighbors walking home late. Maybe my eyes were just playing tricks. But he didn't move. He just stood there. I finally got up the courage to pull the curtain closed and crawl back into bed. After a while, I convinced myself it was fine. I fell asleep eventually. The next morning, I checked the driveway. Nothing. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. But the next night, he was back. Same spot. Same posture. Standing at the end of the driveway, facing my window. I wanted to run downstairs and tell my parents, but something about the way he stood there made me feel like I couldn't. Like if I left the window, if I looked away for even a second, he would move closer. So I just sat there, watching him. After what felt like hours, I blinked and he was gone. Just like that. The following day, I finally told my mom. She gave me that half-smile parents give when they think you're imagining things. You probably saw a shadow, she said. Or maybe Mr. Donnelly from across the street. He sometimes takes walks late. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But deep down, I knew this wasn't a neighbor. Over the next couple of weeks, it became a routine. Every few nights, I'd wake up and find him standing there. Always at the end of the driveway. Always watching. Never moving closer. Until one night, he did. I woke up around 2 in the morning, that same uneasy feeling prickling at the back of my neck. I turned my head toward the window, and my stomach dropped. He wasn't at the end of the driveway anymore. He was standing halfway up it. Closer. I couldn't breathe. My entire body felt locked in place as I stared out at him. The streetlight barely reached him now, but I swear I could see the faintest grin on his shadowed face. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. I just sat there, frozen, until eventually I pulled the blanket over my head and prayed for morning. When I looked out again at dawn, the driveway was empty. After that, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every passing car made me jump. I kept the curtains closed, but that didn't stop the feeling that he was still out there, watching. Then came the night I'll never forget. It was late past midnight when I heard it. Footsteps. Not at the end of the driveway. Not halfway up. But right outside my window. Slow, deliberate steps on the gravel path that led from the driveway to the front porch. I sat up in bed, trembling. The curtains were drawn, but a tiny gap in the fabric let me see just enough. And through that sliver, I saw him. Standing just below my window. so close I could see the top of his head, the way his dark hair stuck out in messy tufts. He tilted his face upward, like he knew I was watching from behind the curtain. That was the first time I saw his eyes. They were wide, unnaturally wide, reflecting the faint light like an animal's. And they were locked on mine. I stumbled back from the window, nearly tripping over a chair in my room. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I finally found my voice and screamed for my parents. My dad came charging into the room, flicking on the light. I pointed at the window, shouting, "He's right there! He's right there!" My dad yanked the curtains open. But the driveway was empty. He went outside with a flashlight, storming up and down the street, but he didn't find anyone. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. Just silence. After that night, I refused to sleep in my room. For weeks, I slept on the couch in the living room, where the curtains were thicker and the windows didn't face the driveway. My parents were frustrated, but they let me, probably because they saw how pale and exhausted I'd become. Eventually, we moved. Not because of him, my dad had a job change, but I was glad to leave that house behind. Still, sometimes I wonder if he was real. If he was just some stranger who had been stalking us. Or if he was something else entirely. All I know is, when I close my eyes, I can still see those wide, unblinking eyes staring up at my window. And sometimes, late at night, when I hear footsteps outside my current house, I can't help but think about him. The man on the driveway.